Hillary Black is a conversation designer, founder of conversationdesignerdrops.com, and co-founder and head of marketing at Mauve. She is also the creator of the online community Conversation Designers Internet Club, author of the online course Chatbot Writing and Design from UX Writers Collective, and content creator featured on Discover.bot, Alexa.com, Botmock, UXPA, and more. Her passion is helping people just like you become conversation designers, create better bots, and get hired. So thank you so much for being with us today, Hillary. And looks like we are up to 45 attendees, which is awesome. So I will hand it over to you.
Awesome. Well, yeah, like I said, super excited to be here. I thank you guys so much from wherever you are tuning in. And today I'm going to be talking about failure. And so the title of this talk is Failure is an Option, which is all about how to help your chatbot fail without frustration. My name is Hillary Black. My background is actually in social media and copywriting. I spent 10 years in social media working at brands like Vine, Beats by Dre, Gray Advertising, University of Michigan, before I got into conversation design about 5 years ago. And since then, I have been in the startup world, starting and working at my own companies. Brielle mentioned pretty much all of them. And like she said, my passion really is helping people become conversation designers. So this is what my talk is all about. This is what all of my content is all about, is created specifically for all the people who are in this room. So why are we here right now? Sorry, I didn't get that. Won't cut it anymore. We're here to talk about failure, and really we're here to talk about user experience and why this sorry, I didn't get that mentality of how chatbots fail really does not work. It really is not the best for user experience, and it really is hurting our industry. Just a few stats to start out with. 50% of enterprise AI implementations were failing in 2019. 50% of people said that chatbots didn't know how to solve their issues. And this is something that, like, as conversation designers, I'm sure that you have experienced bots like this that just don't work. And it really is a absolutely terrible experience, and it makes people not trust them. It makes people not want to interact with them, and it really makes businesses not want to invest in them, which is one of the most important things about that, is that we really need to make sure that, you know, businesses want to continue to work with people like us and invest in this technology, and that bots keep getting smarter instead of getting dumber. So really the problem with this, and the reason why this sort of issue exists of failure, is because of the way that these bots are designed in the first place. So it's not just a matter of like they don't know anything, it's that we're not creating a strategic approach, and we're not creating a way for them to fail. We're not setting them up to successfully fail, which sounds very kind of confusing, and you know, you don't want your bot to fail. But as we all know, like, it's inevitable, it's going to happen. And so we want to make sure that we actually have a good design backing up what we're going to set out for these users. And we want to make sure that we actually have these failures and guardrails in place so that we can have a good experience. So as conversation designers, it's our responsibility first, of course, to advocate for the user. We also want to guide how the technology enhances the experience, which is also including failure. And we want to make sure that we're not letting failure be the default. So we don't want to just accept that we need to say, sorry, I don't understand you. We don't want to just accept that we can say, oops, like, I'll try that again. And of course, we need to say that. And there's times where we're going to say that, but it doesn't have to be the only way. And there are many different ways that I'm going to talk about today. There's like a multi-level approach that I use so that you can turn those frustrating experiences into good experiences, and you can take those failures and actually recover them. But more than that, you can actually get a user to trust you. You can get someone to be able to do a little bit more than what you might have designed for that exact experience. As I said, I'm going to be talking about my personal strategy that I use in all of the bots that I design, and then also how you can improve those experiences over time with the metrics that you learn and actually with the failures that you're going to have. And then at the end, if I have time, I will answer all of your questions. And if I don't have time, then you can come find me afterwards, and I'm happy to answer any of your questions about failure or about anything else. So first, let's talk about the old way of designing for failures and how these dumb bots that I was talking about are giving good ones and giving all the ones that we are designing a bad name. So the first approach, which is very common when it comes to SMS bots, which is what I primarily design, is to just ignore the problem. So a lot of times, instead of even having this sort of like, you could call it a failure, you could call it a fallback. I personally call it a catch-all, which is probably what I'm going to be saying today. But all of that means, this failure message. So in some cases, if they don't understand something, they just ignore it. They just continue to say the same message over and over and over. And that's what you'll see in this approach here on the left, which is a text from World Market. It's a store if you're not familiar with that. And so I was just asking, and I like to do this whenever I come across a bot in my real life, is I kind of like to test the limits a little bit. And so I just said, where's my nearest store? I would think if they're sending me a coupon, they would be able to tell me where my nearest store is so I can go use the coupon. But they can't. And they also can't tell me, where a store is located. They also can't respond to me when I'm just saying like thumbs down. So this really is doing absolutely nothing to improve the experience. It's just making, I know I was doing this on purpose, but at the same point, if someone wanted to talk to someone, just sending these text messages, it's doing nothing for them. And then the approach 2 on the right, which is the most common thing, is to just say that message I mentioned at the beginning. Sorry, I didn't get that, and then repeat the question. So this would be, the example I gave here is someone who is wanting to get pre-qualified for a business loan, and the user is asking about a personal loan. It's something that's an adjacent thing, and so you could see there would be a place where a user might ask that all the time. They might ask, can I get a personal loan when you're talking about business loan? It's all kind of finance things. And so that's something that you can actually be listening for. But here it's just saying, sorry, I didn't get that. Do you want a business loan? And they're saying, I want a personal loan. Sorry, I didn't get that. And then, the user just says, forget it, and they leave.
We also believe in putting people first by treating them right.
Ooh. So have any of you designed this way? If you could just write in the chat. Personally, I have. It's totally okay if you have used these strategies in the past and if you have repeated yourself, one time or another, but we don't have to do this. And like I said, it's totally okay. It's okay to still continue to use some of these things sometimes. And I see someone, Taylor, is saying consultants love to push this. It is important to push having a plan and having something, even if you only are able to say, sorry, I didn't understand you, but we don't have to just end there. And that's really the point of, what I want to talk about is that doesn't have to be enough. So what's actually happening here is that the expectations aren't meeting the reality. So the user expects that they can come to a bot, which is smart, it's using AI, it's all these things that the business says that it is. But it doesn't match the reality that they can't actually say that. They can't actually come to get a personal loan. So there's no real plan to get this person back on track. They're just kind of repeating themselves until the user just says like, fine, I'll do what you want instead of what I want. It could be that these bots are only using rules and they're not using natural language understanding. And that's the case when they're kind of just ignoring you. They're not actually listening to what you're saying. They have a set of rules and their flow map that they're following, and they're not actually registering anything you're saying. It's just you're picking the options. And if you pick one that's not there, then you have to kind of just try to get back on track in some way. And then the last thing that might be going on here is they are using NLP, but they haven't actually applied a conversational flow to that, and they aren't listening for the correct intent. So in the case that I mentioned before this, the person is not listening for a personal loan. And even if they are listening for personal loan, they don't have a flow associated with that can actually reply to the user and say, we don't offer personal loans. So how can we make this better? So this multi-level approach that I have mentioned several times is to be, number one, listening. So listening for intents, both globally and in the context of the question. Using a contextual error message. So that is where you will be saying, you are trying to do this, I can't do that, or this is not valid, please reply in a valid way. And then also a multi-level catch-all approach. So that would be where you are trying multiple times to get them back on track in different ways. And so I see somewhere in the chat here, Brenda said that she has 7 rotating messages that try for re-engagement. And so that's a good approach, is having this multi-level way that you are trying to figure out what the user is intending to do, even if you can't understand it, and try to get them back on track. So what does this actually look like? And how do you actually decide which thing you're going to be using where? So if you are looking at the qualifying question experience, so say, do you want to get a small business loan? And the user replies with something unexpected. So that could be anything from what's the weather to can I get a personal loan to who are you to anything like that, or they misspell something. So what could happen is either the intent is registered and you understand what they're saying, or the intent is not registered. And so if the intent is registered, there's 2 options that you could do. One would be to send a specific error message that is specific to what they actually said. And that could be something is valid or invalid. I'll talk more about this later. Or you can have a corresponding microflow, which is sort of just like a bridge message that can get a user from where they were trying to go back to where they need to go. Or they could say something unexpected and you don't know what they said. And it's okay if you don't have the most sophisticated technology and you are not able to understand every single intent ever. Like, we all need to start somewhere, and we need to be able to adopt these technologies, improve them over time, and know that we're not perfect and that we cannot do everything in the entire world. And so in that case, the intent is not registered. And then we can go through our catch-all. And I personally go through like a 3-level approach where I will eventually hand the person off to a human, but you don't have to be doing it this way. You could be doing it with 7 messages. You could be doing it with 40 messages. You could be doing it with 1 or 2 messages. So as I mentioned, intents will be the first line of defense. So this will be the first thing that we're trying to do, is trying to understand what a person means. I'm assuming that most of the people in this room know what an intent is when it comes to bots, but really this is helping us to understand what the person is trying to mean. So this is there for those off script moments. If you are using a script where you have your pre-planned flows and maybe you are using quick replies, maybe you're not using them, but it's for these moments where you can recover the conversation in smart ways just by knowing what the person is trying to say. So when the intent is detected, then you can act in a variety of ways. You could ignore the message. You could put the user off to a different place if they're, say, trying to schedule an appointment. You can send them a general message. You can send them a custom message. But ideally, you could be doing both things. You could be acting and responding in a certain way. And so one of the things that I think we struggle with the most as designers is that people want to just apply AI, as they say, and expect it to work and expect it to know how to respond to everything and know how to do everything. And we know that's not the case. You still need to have a conversation designer involved. You still need to have strategy. You still need to design. Someone needs to write those messages. And so that would be us, the conversation designers. And so, as I mentioned, the intents that you're going to be listening for can either be global, meaning they could be recognized anywhere, anytime in the entire experience. They could be across one bot. If you are working for an agency or multiple clients, they could be used across multiple bots. So this might be something like what's the weather, or some of the more like small talk type of topics. Or things like, say you work like always in the financial space, you could have certain things that you always understand for any sort of financial bot. or you can have in context intents. And so in context means only recognized in a specific question, i.e. in a specific context. And so this would be something that you can accept more than one answer to a question, or the question itself being open-ended. So that would be if you said, what's your zip code? You could be listening for every zip code that is valid, the 9-digit number, I think it is, that is valid. Or you could be, offering that as like a location or something like that, but you can't always have every single multiple choice option in a button. And so sometimes we need to have open-ended questions, or we have something where if you are, always expecting that a person is going to be using the quick replies and instead they want to type the word yes instead of pushing the button for yes, you can be listening for that content, that context. So for example, if you ask a question and you say, like, one of the options is get started, and instead of the person pressing the button get started, they type the word yes, they still mean get started. But if they were to type yes anywhere else in your entire bot, it wouldn't mean that. It would not mean get started. It could mean actually yes to the answer of a question. And so that would be an example where it's only in this context of this question of this bot does yes mean get started. So here are two examples beyond what I was just saying. So for global intents, this would be personal loan, the example I used before. So instead of just not understanding personal loan because we service small business loans, this is something that, and this was an example for an actual client of mine, we were trying to get people to apply for business loans. And a lot of people were saying, do you have personal loans? So eventually we just said, this is failing too many times. Let's add in an intent for personal loans anywhere in this entire bot and the entire context of this whole bot. We're going to know that personal loans is something that we don't service. And so we could say a specific message to that, a specific micro flow of saying, unfortunately, we only have financing solutions for businesses at this time. We don't handle personal loans. This is a much better answer than just saying, sorry, I don't get that. It's much better for the user to know why they can't get a personal loan in this bot. And it gives them this idea of say, and it's something that the client could eventually, maybe they do offer personal loans. They can message all of those people that wanted a personal loan and they can now offer it to them, or they can change this one piece of content in their bot and then they can move forward with having both business loans and personal loans. And so the example of the in context would be JS, which is a TikTok person that we were creating a bot with. And so in this bot, she would be promoting this like Jewel class action lawsuit. This is something that actually happened. And so, it's saying in this, have you ever used a Jewel? The person says yes. And then the person says, is this JS? Because she's the person who directed them to this bot. And so this name and this person only makes sense in this actual bot, not in every bot ever. It's not necessarily in the context of a question. This is something that was just mentioned to them in this experience. And so we want to be listening for her name because we expected that people would try to use it. And so instead of just assuming that, no one's ever going to want to talk to this person who promoted this bot for them, we actually want to have a response that is tailored to that. And so we didn't say, I don't understand. We said, no, this is Mav, but I love her TikToks. And that's something that is going to build that trust, build that bot confidence with the user. And so they're going to want to continue on because they know it's not her, but they still know that we can have a good experience for them. And I mean good because they're not having failures, but also not good because it's talking about vaping. So how do you know what to listen for? This is a really big question because the opportunities are kind of endless and you have to start somewhere, as I said before. You have to have a place where you're saying, okay, we're going to launch this bot, whether it is for your entire company, whether it is for a specific client, if you're an agency. But I think it's a good place to start by looking at two different categories of intents. One being common. So that would be anything from small talk, like saying hello, hi means hello, yes means yeah, thanks and thank you are the same. And so that would kind of be, alternative ways to saying things that you're already offering. So if you are saying you're offering them contact us and they say human, you know that those could mean the same things. Also, things like brand and bot background information, especially if you have like an avatar of your bot, people might want to know like who is Mav, and that's the name that we're always using is Mav, and so they might want to know who is Mav. And instead of just failing at that, which we should not be, we can actually have a flow that is associated with that, but we're not offering it up as an answer to them for them to like click on or for them to know that it's there, but it is there behind the scenes. And then another one is interface relevant. So this is kind of like depending on the channel that you're on. So if you are on SMS, something like I'm driving is something that you should be listening for, but that's not something that works across every platform. Like not everyone is using Facebook Messenger and driving, but people are on their phones. And so they might be texting when you're texting them and they're trying to respond and now they're driving. So this is something that would be common across every SMS bot or WhatsApp bot. And then there's the specific ones. And so if you're going through your script, what you want to do is think of where would you get confused? And this can also be used to improve your design. You could go through your entire design and say, if I got to this point, what other questions would I have? So if I'm going into a financial services bot and I'm a person who's looking for any type of loan, would I be asking a question about personal loans? Would I be asking a question about my credit score? What credit do you need for this? Would I be asking about my income? Are there things that are relevant that aren't necessarily a part of the experience, but they're these like follow-up questions that someone might have? If you ask a person, for their rewards number, their loyalty number, they might not know where to find it, and you need to be able to tell them that information. These are all things that are like more specific that you could apply to this. And another one would be similar to like the interface relevant, the bot relevant questions. So learning from your existing failures of where people got confused in your specific bot. So we had one, because I do a lot of legal and like healthcare related bots. We had one that was asking about, pre-existing conditions for elderly people, and someone had replied, this person is deceased. And so instead of failing, obviously, we really want to make sure that we're being sensitive in a situation like this, that we are listening for all of those variations, and that we are training and replying to this with the appropriate message. But yeah, so the next thing is the contextual error message. So this is where a bot asks a question and we can be listening for a specific option or a valid response. And so while this isn't something that we are going to be necessarily registering as an intent, this is something that we're registering as valid or not valid. So that would be a zip code, a date, an email address, something that you're actually able to validate is positive or negative. And so if the user does not provide this valid response, instead of just failing, we can actually tell them why this response is not accepted and how to reply. So this is the best way to fail, is by being able to offer the people a reason as to why their answer is not valid. And so instead of just saying, sorry, I don't understand, you can say, please reply with a valid email address. And that is something that is much better for the user because they actually know what they're doing wrong instead of just continuing to try the same thing over and over and over. So this is the best way to educate your user and to just have like a contextually relevant conversation with them. And so, as I said, the purpose of these messages is to educate the user about why their answer was not accepted and tell them how to respond to the question and inform them for future responses. So they know if they're going off script a lot, that in the future, they should not be doing that. And then this can also alert us as conversation designers as to what questions might need more context. And so if you're seeing people go off script a lot on a specific question, it might be because you need to add another option or because you need to tell them, more information about how they can reply. For example, in a real estate bot, if you are saying, you know, select what you want to buy and you're only offering home, an apartment, a condo, a townhouse, and someone is writing RV, you know, you could be listening for these types of messages. And then next time you can either add that in, or you could just, you know, tell them, hey, can you please only select from these available options? We only offer these types of homes. And so it just helps us for the future know what we need to build in. And so this also will limit the amount of open-ended questions and answers, which will provide better data to our customers. And so the example that I gave here for the, you know, these types of messages is validating the annual income. And so if a person is saying, I don't make enough money, or, you know, I make a lot of money, or, you know, I make millions of dollars. Those are all things that are technically, you know, an answer to the question, but they aren't the answer that we are looking for. And so what we want to tell them is, what answer are we looking for? We're saying, you know, select a specific range or reply with the dollar amount and give it an example of how we want them to reply. And this is really key. You want to provide them with examples of what to do, especially if they've done something wrong. And if you don't do that, then they're probably just going to continue doing the wrong things over and over and over, and no one is going to win in that situation. So how do you design and manage these error messages and microflows? I mentioned so many different ways that you can create them and strategies for using them, but what actually do you do in order to put this into practice? And how do you as a conversation designer actually manage this? And so microflows, as I mentioned before, are those sort of one sentence or a short phrase kind of bridge messages between your intents and your flows. So when you are listening for something and they say that, you might have a different flow that you can direct them to, especially if they used, you know, some sort of small talk, or they used an answer that is one of your intents, but it's not technically a multiple choice answer. You can just use this as a bridge to get them to where they need to go. And so the core differences between contextual error messages, which also are a short phrase, and microflows is that a contextual error message is only used as a response to a question, versus a microflow can be used for any intent, anywhere, anytime, whenever you want. So something that I created specifically for this and that I am going to use and also share with you is a global intent library. So here is what that is. So this spreadsheet is where I keep track of all of my intents and the microflows associated with them. So there are two ways that I am currently doing this in my like day-to-day design practice. One way is to keep track of the intents as it relates to the specific question. And so that would be the in context intents. And then the other way is to keep track of the global flows. So this would be something that can work either across the entire bot or any bot. And so the example here is for the in context is where I was writing, you know, the intro. I'm writing my hello flow, which is like, hey, welcome to Finance Bros, some sort of image. We help you get approved for business financing in a matter of hours, get funds as fast as one day. Want to find out if you're pre-qualified. So here's the options that I'm giving them as quick replies, which is get pre-qualified, contact us, about us. So that's going to my specific flows, but I'm also accepting all of these other intents. And so I use this document to kind of communicate to my developers that are going to be building this, to tell them, here's what I want you to offer, but I also want to accept all of these other answers for this question. I want to accept, start, continue, yes. I want to accept, okay. I want to accept personal loan, even though that's not a part of this because we're doing business loans, and that's going to jump to this specific flow. I want to accept help, support, et cetera, et cetera. So I will keep track of all of this as I'm writing my script, and then I will make sure that I'm telling them exactly where I want them to go. So another example then would be for these global intents. So this is anytime a person says anything in any of my bots. If they say any combination of I'm busy, then I'm going to reply with this specific message. And as I said before, you can choose when you register an intent to act and to respond, or you can do both. And so what I want to do here is tell the developers that I work with how to do both of those things. So I'm saying, this is how we're going to reply when a person does our busy intent. And then this is what we're going to do. We're going to follow up again in the next business day. And so this is just the best way that I've found to be able to keep track of all of this stuff. Here's what I mentioned before. This person is deceased. This is anywhere, anytime, in any sort of bot where someone says a person is deceased, we say, you know, we're so sorry to hear that, our condolences. And what we're going to do is we're going to opt them out. And so I actually have shared this document with all of you in my goodie bag. So you can use it however you want. You can create your contextual error messages of the email not being valid, of the phone not being valid, of birthday not being valid. So there's like tons and tons of ways that you can use this. You can, you know, create your scripts in here. I have another document that is just for scripts that I use. That's the same format. So this is kind of like version 2 of that. And I keep this document up to date all the time. I always am looking at this. I'm always adding to it. And this is just a way for me to be able to keep track of all of the copy, not inside of whatever you're using to train your intent. So that's like the other part of it. But you still need to know, you know, what is that copy going to look like? What is that experience going to look like? And you need to be able to put those two pieces together to actually build the experience. And so the last thing that also is in here, sorry, let me go back over here really quick. So the catch-all, this is the final option of how to fail that I talked a little bit about before. So this is where you will find your traditional, sorry, I didn't get that message, is in the catch-all. And that is what it should be for. It is something that can catch all of your messages. That's why I call it that. And so this way you can create your multi-level catch-all. This is, you know, how I do that. I usually go with 3 levels. I also have something if it's a user issue or if the bot is broken. I do find that it's important to make sure that you are communicating if you did something wrong and not making the user feel as if they did something wrong. So we could say here, like, I'm experiencing an error, and you can try that again. Or you can say, you know, I'm not understanding. And this might not be the best way to be saying that. I know that everyone has, you know, their strategy of how they try to get the user back on track. This is just personally how I do it. So again, to talk about that approach in a prettier way, level 1, I'm going to be saying, you know, I'm not understanding why I'm not understanding, and then restate the question. Level 2, I'm going to be asking them specifically what they want to do. And as you're going through, you want to make sure that you're making it easier and easier for them to get back on track. So level 2, instead of just restating the question, I will provide multiple choice options. And I will say, here's exactly what you can do. You can go back, you can talk to a person, you can start over, you can go over here, you can go over here, and allowing that to be something that they can use as a navigation, because at this point, they failed more than one time. It's very easy to fail one time, but to fail twice, you kind of need help there. And then level 3, I'm also offering that multiple choice, and I'm offering a human handoff. And so this is only 3 options, but you can have as many options as you want. You could have infinity amount of options. And honestly, maybe you want to do that. Maybe you have, you know, a lot of people who are trying to use this bot in many complex ways. If you have something that is very open-ended, you want to make sure that you are allowing people to get to where they need to go. Yes, you can get a copy of this spreadsheet, both the spreadsheet, this intent library, and then my script spreadsheet. You can also get a copy of that. It will be in your goodie bag, and the slides will also be there. So yeah, as I mentioned, you know, the catch-all is just for all of that failure that you want to be able to recover, because that's really what we're trying to do at the end of this, is we're trying to recover and go back and get this person to where they need to go, whether they're purposely trying to mess up, whether they are saying things that aren't a part of this, or if they just need help. You know, sometimes we all fail, and we just want to be able to have multiple ways that this person can get to where they need to go. So how do you improve this? how do you know all of this? How do I know which intents that I need to be doing? How do I know which catch-alls I need to be doing? How do I know what I'm going to say? How did I know that a person said that they were deceased? The way that I know this is by tracking it. So you want to make sure that you are tracking your rates of catch-all per conversation. So how many times is a person failing? How many times is someone failing in your entire bot across all users? And you want to actually see why these are failing. You want to see that you can see what the person was trying to do. If your intents aren't working, do you need to add more to that? If you are seeing that people are typing a lot of the same thing and every single time it's triggering your catch-all, you need to be using your design skills in order to improve this experience. So use every failure. And I mean, if you're failing a lot, which I hope that you're not, use every failure as an opportunity. Use every time that is triggered, every time your contextual error messages are triggered, every time your catch-all is triggered, use it as an opportunity to improve what you're doing and to just reevaluate the strategy that you've set up. NLP is awesome, and I am so glad that we are able to actually improve these experiences, but we still need a lot of design. Like in the most of this, I talked about what the design is and what a designer needs to do, because we want to make this still be conversational. We want to make the user feel good about it, and we want to make sure that we can actually do more than 50% of people saying that the bot couldn't answer their question. That is not good enough. I personally believe that is not good enough, and it is our job to fix that. So, add these actions, add these microflows as often as you can, add these intents, and make sure that you revisit it regularly to make sure that everything is up to date. Even the smartest bots get stumped sometimes, and failure is an option. Like I said, we are going to fail. People are going to test the limits. People are going to mess up. But having a solution for these moments where we're just saying, oops, is one of the most powerful things a conversation designer can do. It is our responsibility to make sure that these users feel good and that they're able to accomplish their goals at the end of it. Any questions? I see a lot of questions. Won't the user get frustrated after 3 failed attempts? Seems like a handover for a person is better than infinite fails. Yes, I agree. So I typically offer them to talk to a human after 2. So after 2, like after the first one, and then on the second one, you can offer it like get help. But that's not always available. So that's not always available depending on what you're building on, depending on your capabilities with technology. You might not be able to do that. But yeah, it is frustrating, but also the alternative is kind of, not great either, because if they can never get back on track, then the entire thing kind of doesn't work. And so I think that's definitely a place where if you are getting people past level 2, you should be alerting people on your team. So we have like a Slack message that we'll send when someone gets past level 2, and we can even go in and redirect them. And so that's something that, like, technology wise too, you could be going in and moving this user back to where they need to go in real time if that's something that is important to you and if that's something that happens very regularly. Who decides the number 3? This is something that just over time has been something that has worked for us. We actually don't see a lot of people get to level 3. I think if someone is getting to level 3, a lot of times they're purposely trying to break the bot, but we do see people get to level 2. And so it's more about having something that is beyond where you're getting to. So if you see that people are failing only once, maybe you only need to do 2 levels. But if you see people are failing 3 times or more than 3 times, that's something that you want to take into account and maybe even reevaluate the strategy that you're using. Have I noticed a correlation with the option to pass off to a human and intentional misuse? So this is what people do on the phone. And so I think that if people are using a chatbot because they think they can get a faster option, that's probably because the question they're asking is pretty simple. And so they should be able to get to it. But I would think that, a lot of people, the reason they're using chatbots is because they're fast. And so I don't know that a user's actually going to use that mechanism to get to a human, but of course that depends, because a lot of times people kind of hide their humans behind their chatbots, especially in like airlines. They kind of make you go through their bot first, then make you go to a human. And so I do think that people are going to do that to try to bypass, but at the same time, like, let them bypass that. And if that's all they're trying to do, it's kind of similar to how it works on a phone when you are, pressing the numbers and all you're doing is saying agent, 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 agent. You want to get to that anyways. And so let the people get to that. In my experience, is it better to use a quick reply driven approach or text? This is another thing where it really is going to depend on your client and like your experience that you're designing. And it's also going to depend on your technology. So if your technology is not to a level where you can understand everything, I do think that you should be offering quick replies. That's just my personal professional opinion. I do think that quick replies are an easy way to get people from point A to point B. The people understand it, it works. And if your technology and your AI is not good enough, then you don't want to be just like opening up the inbox for people to fail. You don't want to be leaving every single question open-ended. But of course, there are questions that can't be with a quick reply, like an email address or like a zip code. But again, that really kind of just depends on what your capabilities are from a technology standpoint, and then like your experience in general. So if you are having something where the user would have to type in a lot of characters, like if I said, how many years have you been in business? And the options are like over 10 years, the person might not want to type all of that in. They might want to just press a button to do that. And so I think a lot of that is just going to go back to your opinion as a designer of how much do you think that people need to be typing? And do you need to understand the entire context of their situation? So if you don't need to know that this person has, used a vape 45 times, you only need to know if they've used it yes or no, then that's something that you could just offer as a yes or no question instead of asking them an open-ended question. Someone asked for a follow flesh bag. Oh, when they were asking for a human. See, yeah, that's something where I'm sure that you weren't listening for that intent. But that's something that you could add to your human intent if you were trying to train your model to be better. Okay, no more questions. Well, that's it for me then today.